This KFAN podcast is sponsored by Builders and Remodelers, exclusive Twin Cities provider of Elements Windows. Get the highest quality windows at unmatchable value. Visit buildersandremodelers.com for more details.
Mike Russo from The Athletic back here in the big chair, bumper to bumper, 3 to 6:30. Big day for the program. A lot of hockey talk. Matt Maka, the Wild CEO, will be coming up. Anthony LaPanta in studio. We'll talk Twins and Wild with him. Greg Cronin, the old Anaheim Ducks coach, will be joining. He's now the new Wild Iowa coach. Elliot Friedman, Johnny Athletic, Kevin Weeks, and my first guest after a big day for the Minnesota Wild. They went out and they acquired Vladimir Tarasenko for nothing, absolutely nothing. But they take on his $4.75 million contract, and they're hoping to get better things than he delivered for the Detroit Red Wings last year. The Athletic's Max Bultman covered Vlad last year. And Max, how are you? Apparently we lost Max, Sam, behind the glass, which, by the way, I can't see can't see Sam today. But let me tell you exactly what happened here with the Vladimir Tarasenko thing. So basically, I think the Wild started to really do some work on trying to figure out on what free agent winners could be available tomorrow when free agency opens at 11 a.m. And basically what happened was I think they started to realize that guys like Ehlers, met Kyle Granlund, if they even had interest in him, I think that they realized that the term and the money would be too much. And same thing with Brock Besser. I just think that with Besser, it was just one of those things where if he was not going to come here on a 3-year deal, that he just was not going to make sense for the Wild. I think they would have offered 4, maybe even 5, but suddenly for Besser to sign in his hometown, I think they would have had to get up to 6 or 7 years, and I just don't think the Wild were comfortable doing that. I think Besser's going to have all sorts of interest tomorrow on different types of contracts. If he signs for 2 or 3 year deals, it does not necessarily mean that he would have taken that type of contract to be with Minnesota. So I think that's what it comes down to with Brock. And so what happened here is the Wild pivoted. They realized that to get a scoring winger, that this was not going to be something that could have happened tomorrow in the free agent class. The free agent class was just something that to me, you look at the names out there, and I just don't see any sort of fits that would have come to mind with the Wild. And I think that they just look at next year's summer class and they look at the potential trades they can make, and they just felt like, why lock themselves into a long-term deal on a lesser player, and let's go get like sort of a patchwork here with Tarasenko. And as I mentioned, Max Bultman is here and covered Vladdy last year. And Max, I feel like the last month I've been asking you about Patrick Kane. Apparently I should have been asking about Tarasenko.
Yeah, apparently. I mean, it's obviously a little bit of a reclamation bet by the Wild. They don't give anything up. It's a very low-cost bet to make 1 year, and they're just hoping that he's got more than he showed in Detroit last year. And I think that's possible. I think Tarasenko is still a natural scorer. I think there were times last year where you could say he was snake-bitten, where he would get a good look off and it either hit the post or went just wide or, something like that. So I think it's going to be possible. And one reason that I think it's possible is I think he will be probably given a chance to play in a better situation for him this year. I think there were times this year where he played on the side of the ice, the left side, where I don't think he's the most comfortable. I think he likes to play on the right side where he can really use his one-timer. Mm-hmm. And I also think he could play with more skilled line mates potentially in Minnesota. He did get some time in Detroit's top 6 early, but I think pretty quickly when it wasn't working, they kind of moved him more into a third-line role. He wasn't really playing with guys whose mindset was to score, and I think that's probably the best fit for him. And so if he gets a little more of that deployment in Minnesota, I think there is a chance that he had 23 goals 2 seasons ago. So I think there's a good chance he puts up more than 11 he had in Detroit this year.
Yeah, and obviously he's, 3 years removed from scoring 34 with the Blues. I will say, I covered him during that entire Florida Panthers run last year. He had 5 goals. He looked really good with Lundell and Luostarinen, but he didn't seem to get there nearly the way that he used to in St. Louis. And when you look at him, Max, I mean, can he it's one thing if you put Boldy on his left wing or Zuccarello on his left wing and hope that one of them, or even Rossi in the middle, and puts pucks on the platter for him. But is he going to get to the areas where he could score the way that he used to with St. Louis? Do you think that he still has that in him?
I think the foot speed's a concern. I think he's still the heavy body. I think he knows how to position himself and all that. But yeah, I mean, that would probably be my concern if it was on like a Boldy line, is like Boldy's already kind of the not the fastest player. He's going to more carve you up with his brain. And I would worry a little bit about pace as a fit between those two. Maybe if you have a really fast center in between them. Not something I think the Wild are like in super heavy supply on though, right?
No.
Either Rossi or Eriksson or Burner. So that'd probably be my question on that. But I think if you put him in a good situation with a guy who can be the tempo element, I'm sure he would love to play opposite Kirill Kaprizov, for example, right? We'll see if the Wild are interested in that. But I think that'd be the concern. It's probably more flippy. I think he's still got the heaviness to his game. I think he can still fight for space a little bit in the middle of the ice.
Yeah, one thing I was thinking about on the way down here is that Tarasenko long had Kirill Kaprizov's agent and Paul Theophanous, and has fired him, went to another agency, fired them, now is with Pat Brisson. But it's kind of interesting. The Wild are going into this long-term negotiation with Kirill Kaprizov, Max, and all of a sudden they're going to be dealing with an agent that just got fired by the guy they picked up to play on the Wild. I mean, that's one of those things that I would worry about on how Theophanous is going to take this. But when it comes to what type of guy, I will say every time I've interviewed Vladimir, he's super engaging, super nice. What type of guy is he off the ice, in the locker room, all that?
Well, I have to tell you, I didn't get to interact with him a lot. He wasn't in the locker room a lot when we media were in there this year. So I only really talked to him probably 3 or 4 times, but he was always friendly, always thoughtful. So hopefully you have a little more time with him than I think we got. But yeah, I mean, he's always been respectful, always been thoughtful of the answers. Just probably didn't see him as much as we saw some of the other guys. We're
talking with Max Bultman of The Athletic. Final one for you, Max. The one thing here, when you look at this free agent class, I mean, would you kind of agree with my rationale that if the Wild essentially were not going to be comfortable going out and giving major term to somebody, that this might be just a way to punt it down the line for a year, keep some flexibility, and now maybe go into the market next year, and that maybe Vladimir, at least at a minimum, could fill a hole for you for a little while when there is a pretty weak class in front of him.
Yeah, I think it's exactly how you describe it. To get me through bet on a guy who could bounce back, he's got the talent to, and you're just hoping that in a new surroundings it clicks better. Because on this free agent class, when a class is this thin, there's obviously more demand for every player, and at that point you end up having to give either way too much money or too much term to anybody you really want to lure to you. And if you don't like anyone enough to give them that kind of term, and taking a 1-year bet on a guy is a good way to take a chance at upgrading the position. And if it doesn't work, you don't have to buy somebody out in a year. You don't have to be looking to rehome somebody that you just gave 3 years and $4.5 million to. You get the guy for 1 year at 4.75. And if it goes well, if you want to re-sign him, you can. And if it doesn't, you can clean your hands very easily of that. So I think that's exactly what it is.
And just lastly, did you get the impression that they were going to throw him on waivers today for a buyout, or do you think that, and that essentially this stopped it?
Not today. I don't think they were going to buy him out in this window, but I think maybe if they were able to have
somebody go to ARB
in free agency, maybe they could have done it at a later buyout window if they had an ARB case or something, for example. I think if they weren't able to do what they wanted, then he could have been the exact same kind of bet for them here, right? Like it would have been a fallback plan, and if he doesn't get time, then you weigh your options for him. But if Detroit struck out in free agency, they would have been looking for exactly this kind of thing. So and they might still strike out in free agency, but they do have some young guys that I think can backfill that hole. Jonathan Berggren, Elmer Soderblom came up. Carter Mays is a guy who I think they're really excited about. Hasn't really been able to stay healthy. So they have some internal options for it, but I don't think they would have actually bought him out. I think we did come into the offseason thinking that could be a possibility, but clearly they avoid the decision altogether here. Yeah,
and what do you think is going to happen with Kane? I talked to somebody close with him yesterday that said that they were pretty much back on trying to negotiate some sort of contract.
Yeah, I still think it gets done, but I've been thinking it gets done for months, right? And here we are on June 30th, and we're still talking about it. So obviously it wasn't as much of a layup as I expected it to be. Maybe he goes to market. I mean, I think anytime you get this close, it's a real threat because, what's the harm of waiting another 20 hours at this point for Patrick Kane? But they got it done at the buzzer last year. My bet is they still get it done at the buzzer today.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. You can always read Max's work by going to the Red Wings page at The Athletic, and also he's one of our great prospect writers at The Athletic. Actually, will you be covering World Juniors here in Minnesota?
I'm not sure yet. We're in discussion with the editors. We'll slack about it later. I'll tell you what we're thinking.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, hey, Max, really appreciate it, and you can read Max at The Athletic.
All right, sounds good. Thanks so much for having me, Mike.
That is Max Boltman of The Athletic, covered Vladimir Tarasenko last year. Obviously, again, trade today sort of came out of the blue. I think it was just a pivot from the Wild when they realized that if they were going to sign Brock Besser, that probably was going to be a term that they didn't want to give, and that's a 6 or 7 year deal probably for Brock. And so they take this 1 year bet on Vladimir Tarasenko and see if he could reestablish his career, look more like the player that he looked like with St. Louis or even his little stint in Florida. And as Bill Guerin said to Vladimir, according to the social media post that the Wild put out, the pedigree of winning too. This is somebody that's won a couple cups now since 2019. He obviously used to be one of the great goal scorers in the game. Wild fans know that more than anybody because he used to light him up. Point a game player pretty much against the Wild, and had 2 great playoffs against the Wild out of the 3 that he's played against Minnesota. So we'll see how it comes. It'll be an interesting day tomorrow now because now they are sort of out of the market for a scoring winger. We'll see what they do in terms of center. There are guys like Nico Sturm, who was my guest last week when I filled in for Barreiro. There's players like Sean Corrali, Radek Faksa, Christian Dvorak. So we'll see if the Wild have something up their sleeves tomorrow. But suddenly the depth chart is starting to get filled out here, and the Wild don't have a lot of work to do. I do think a lot of depth players might sign with the Wild tomorrow. They traded Declan Chisholm the other day. We'll talk about that more when LaPanta is in here. So I think they got to add some depth there. And obviously they need a third goalie. When we come back, big news today from the Minnesota Wild. Besides the Vladimir Tarasenko trade, the Wild have a new, traded naming rights partners. They've gone from XL Energy to Grand Casino. Grand Casino Arena will be starting in September. That was announced today. And their first concert will be event at the new Grand Casino Arena will be the Jason Aldean Show. We'll be talking to Wild CEO Matt Make on the other side of the break. This is Michael Russo from The Athletic back here on The Fan. Michael Russo from The Athletic back here on The Fan. My thanks to Max Boltman for giving us a rundown on Vladimir Tarasenko. We'll talk a lot about Vlad when Anthony LaPanta gets in here as well. Greg Cronin, the new coach of the Iowa Wild, still to come. Johnny Athletic, Elliot Friedman, and Kevin Weeks. We might even have a surprise guest. It's a surprise to him right now because I just called upon him. That's Lou Nanny, but we'll see if he can come on. But my next guest, big news down at the former XL Energy Center today. It's going to become it's going to be one of those muscle memory things, Matt Maka, that I'm going to have to get out of my head. I almost said down at XL Energy Center, but as we know, it's now the Grand Casino Arena. That was the big news this morning. And welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Always good to talk to you. And yeah, it's a big day for us here and for Grand Casino. We've been, in discussions with them for, quite a number of months now. And the more we spoke to each other, the more we found lots of common ground that made sense for a big partnership like this. And we're excited to get it announced today.
Matt, you have been you're the CEO of the Wild. You've been with the Wild since before the organization essentially existed, coming over from Rollerblade. The one constant about this organization for 25 years was XL Energy Center. Even for you, that's got to be weird.
Yeah, it is different, right? And I should take a moment to thank XL Energy for 25 years of remarkable partnership. They are awesome people, and we did announce recently that they are staying on board with us as a very significant partner for the days to come, and we're happy about that. But today's really about our friends at Grand Casino and kind of the marriage of us to them. And yeah, it'll be a new era here, a new name for the building, and a new brand story to tell together, and we're working hard on that right now. And
talking to you, you said that there were dozens of potential partners that you and Oakview Group reached out to, and obviously Grand Casino comes in with a 14-year partnership. What does that entail that comes with it besides the big flashy new name that's going to be on the building?
Yeah, so like we had with XL Energy as our naming rights partner for all those years. I mean, there are the obvious advantages and the profile that comes with, putting your name literally on top of the building and throughout the building. But there's promotional and sort of brand stories to tell together. Honestly, we're really happy that we landed with a Minnesota-based organization, and, the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe has a really interesting, rich cultural history that we do intend to honor and tell. along with just promoting, the business they have. And, I know, of course, people think of them as a gaming operation, which they are, but they also, do a great deal of work in entertainment, at their venues and hospitality. And so we have a lot in common in that way. And again, the more we spoke, the more this made sense to both of us. And yeah, we're signed on board for 14 years. The official date of the transition will be September 3rd. The first big event as Grand Casino Arena will be the Jason Aldean concert on September 6th. So we have a little bit of work to do to get this thing officially launched, but we wanted to say it out loud today.
And I mean, this is a stupid question, but what are the next logistics? Like, when does the signage come down?
Yeah,
when does it get replaced?
It's not a stupid question. It's like, well, all we're spending our time on right now is trying to, honestly, I think I'm quoting this right. I think we have like 3,000 places in the arena where it currently says XL Energy Center. So we have a little bit of transition to work on. That's why it's going to take us a couple of months to figure all that out. There's the big sign outside the arena, but you can imagine throughout the arena, we do have to change a fair bit. We got to put a new website together. So we have a lot of work to do with our partners at Grand Casino, and we'll be spending the summer on that. That'll be our summer project. And then come September, we'll launch this thing officially.
I remember I was staying I used to stay at the Tampa Marriott all the time, right there on the water. And then they built the JW across the street, and they renamed the Tampa. I think it used to be Tampa Water Street, or now it is. And I remember talking to the manager the last time I stayed there, and he's like the amount of work that it goes in. He's like all of a sudden I was in a room one day and I realized, oh my God, we got to get new pens. Like even just little like everything.
Yeah, even highway signs. There's highway signs that have XL Energy Center, next exit. There's so many things to think through, but we're excited to take it on and just kind of launch this new era. Well,
I was just down in Raleigh covering the Eastern Conference Final, and it still does not say Lenovo Center. It says PNC Arena on all the highway signs. So obviously that must take a real while.
Yeah,
I did want to talk to you, Matt, about obviously we know that you went to the state and you're looking, the arena is owned by the city. The arena, the city, the county, and Craig Leopold were willing to essentially, in renovations, more than half of it. And you asked essentially for the other half from the state. That was recently turned down. Where do you go from here to have the renovations that I know that you as an organization feel is essential for a 25-year-old building?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think our request should surprise anyone after 25 years. The building, while it is still a great building for hockey, no question, we have fallen, fairly far behind with regard to, back of house things like, HVAC and cabling and kitchen space, and, even the bathroom lines could be improved, and then there's, some more shiny, and interesting things as well that we want to update. So it's a necessary thing. It's a community asset. It is owned by the city of St. Paul, and I think in many ways, certainly in the nightlife, we are the heartbeat of this city. And so I think there's not a lot of question that it should and needs to be done, just like other buildings have been renovated. So we're going to keep after it. We're disappointed that nothing occurred here, but not many folks got much of anything. So we're not discouraged. We will keep working with our partners at the city of St. Paul, and I'm confident we'll find a solution and relatively soon, because it is an important part of the future of St. Paul, and I think everybody recognizes that.
And the next legislative session starts next January, so essentially you just wait for that?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're like the city, and we are and when the county's in this discussion to some degree as well. We're talking fairly regularly, even now, and kind of regrouping and deciding how we will, make our next approach. But we've got some different ideas about how to go about this, and it gives me optimism for as we move forward here.
We're talking with Wild CEO Matt Maka, and Matt, as I mentioned, this is the 25th anniversary of 25th season of the Minnesota Wild coming up. Obviously, exciting stuff comes with that, including jerseys and all sorts of plans. I know you got to keep a lot of stuff close to the vest, but what can you kind of give a little taste of some of the things that fans could expect this upcoming hockey season?
Yeah, look, I mean, 25 years is, that's a long, there's a lot of great moments in Wild history, even if we haven't yet won that elusive Stanley Cup. But But there's been so many great Wild personalities through the years. We intend to celebrate them and bring some of them back throughout the season at certain games along the way, and have some meet and greets. And we want to just celebrate our history. And you're right, I'm being a little cryptic here because we'll soon announce like more publicly all of our plans. But this is a moment in time, to think back on the 25 years that have been, and to chase that Stanley Cup going forward. But we have a lot to celebrate, and we're looking forward to the season, and pretty darn soon we'll be announcing some of those plans much more specifically than I've just gone through here.
Right. And just lastly, I mean, the other big thing that's going to be happening at the arena this year is the World Junior Championships. And I mean, just how exciting is that? How are ticket sales going for that? And how will that, I mean, I know that the schedule comes out July 16th, but I assume that's going to affect the Wild really well as well. The Ottawa Senators had a 9-game road trip last year when they were hosting the World Juniors. How will this affect everything?
Yeah, it's mostly a really positive thing, of course, to have the profile of that event, as you know, Mike, has just, ascended and accelerated so much in the past, 10 years even. And so, it felt very much like the right time for us to pursue this event. We were thrilled to win the bid. Beginning, the day after Christmas and then moving forward through the early part of January, that will be front and center in our building. And in the city of St. Paul, we'll have the best, 18 and under players in the world, and their fans, descending upon St. Paul, which is going to be an awesome thing for the city and for hockey in Minnesota. And so we're thrilled. Now, you're right. That's going to take, it's actually, I think, 2.5 weeks that we have to be out of the building. So, yeah, you won't see a lot of Wild home games during that late December, early January stretch. But we understand and we're excited about it. I mean, we knew this going in, and it's worth it. We will compress some home games in the other available weeks of the year, and we'll be fine. And I think it's worth the shutdown, if you will, to be able to have the profile of this event here in Minnesota.
Yeah, I remember I think it was 2008 when you hosted the Republican National Convention, and so we left. Remember training camp? We wound up in Grand Forks for most of it. So sometimes you just have to leave.
About that.
Yeah, I mean, the Wild deal with this all the time, right? During the month of March, they have a lot of times where the state tournaments are there. I mean, that's what happens when you have a building with as many dates that entertain as now the Grand Casino Arena. Matt, really appreciate you coming on and giving everybody the good news today.
Thanks, Mike. Always good to talk to you, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.
That is Matt Maka, the CEO of the Minnesota Wild. And when we come back, we're going to talk a lot more about the Wild and the big news today and what could happen this summer with Anthony LaPanta. If you want to text the show, and I've already gotten a bunch of texts. You can text at the Brad Show and Brian KFAN text line at 64686. But we'll talk to Anthony about Tarasenko. Declan Chisholm was just traded from the Wild. He just signed a new 2-year deal with the Washington Capitals at $1.6 million. So we'll talk to him about that, the Freddie Gujar trade. Anthony's my podcast partner, and I haven't had a chance to talk to him a lot about this stuff. So we'll be back here on The Fan.
And Russo, we're going to give away some money. The Fan and BigDeck.com wants to give you a shot to win bonus bucks with our national cash contest. Enter the keyword money at KFAN.com now for your shot at winning. That's keyword money. Enter it now at KFAN.com.
Fan.
Back here on The Fan, Michael Russo from The Athletic, joined by my podcast partner in crime, as we could say, Worst Seats in the House podcast on the Talk North Network, Anthony LaPanta from Bally's Sports. It's FanDuel now.
Sports Network.
See, if it's FanDuel and I'm still calling it Bally's, does that mean that Grand Casino Arena I'm going to still call XL? You're saying by
I don't know
mistake?
That I'm a little worried about that myself. That might slip a couple times. I'll work hard not to. I mean, I still occasionally have referred to Cleveland as the Indians, and it's tough when things have only been one thing.
Yeah.
And arenas change names so often. I will say there have been a couple times in the last couple of years where right before we've gone on the air, I've literally turned around and looked to the center ice logo to remind myself what the arena is called.
Yeah.
Because some of them have changed. One was in Carolina this year. And all of a sudden, I said, wait a minute, this changed names, I think. And I turned around and looked at it as Lenovo Center now. And there was another one in Canada that had changed, and I remember turning and looking literally right before we went on the air to remember what the name of the building was.
The ones they must have 3-year rights deals in Canada because they change every
all the
day.
time. Right?
Yeah.
And then there's Rogers Center, Rogers Arena, Rogers Place, and so I'll occasionally have to look at those to see which one is here. And the difference in this case is that this arena's only been known by one name, so it's really the only. You almost forget it's even a naming rights deal. It's just the name of the place, and it'll be. I hope that we don't, because obviously that's a big part of the deal is that nobody slips and says the wrong name on TV. So I'll make sure I get it right.
You know, it's funny because on Twitter, it has become like a shtick where when the Wild play in Denver, I still will say, all right, here from the Pepsi Center, just to almost tick people off. If I do that with XL Energy Center, the Wild will come at me hard.
Yeah.
You can't do it.
With good reason, because those
people pay
the companies pay a ton of money for it. So they want it referred the proper way, written about, mentioned on TV, the radio, whatever.
Yep.
And I know it's a big deal, and I don't mean to make light of it, in that if we slip, it's not going to be on purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, just a couple housekeeping items. I remember I said I had a surprise guest, and it was going to be a surprise to him. Lou Nanny is coming on now at 5 o'clock. So Lou Nanny at 5. We also have, again, Greg Cronin, Giant Athletic.
Surprise guest.
No, you were everybody knew about that one. Elliot Friedman and Kevin Weeks as well. And Kevin's got a cool venture that I'm actually a part of tonight that's going to be on a digital thing that he's starting. So we'll talk to Kevin about that. Also, if you want to text the Bradshaw and Brian KFAN text line, questions for Anthony and I at 64686. Already a ton of them lining up. If I don't get to them a bunch with Anthony, I'll get to them after the fact. But Anthony, big news of the day. AJ LaPanta left his laptop in your house, apparently. Again, for the 15th time, flew back to Denver without it.
I wasn't sure that was a valid... That actually happened.
How
that
could you not
confirmed.
think that was possible?
Well, no, I thought it was kind of a joke on a text chain. I got up early this morning. So for the full story, it was Donkey Classic weekend this year, which is a long weekend. It's a marathon for everybody involved. A practice round Friday morning, a pasta feed and bocce ball tournament Friday night, 36 holes Saturday at Loggers Trail, followed by hot Dago sandwiches on our patio, and then 36 at White Eagle in Hudson on Sunday. Plenty of cocktails along the way. So by the end of the weekend, everybody's pretty well shot. And AJ had an early morning flight, so I volunteered to be the guy to make the 6:45 a.m. run to the airport. And after I dropped him off, and your former cohort, Chad Graff, who was also in town for the tournament. So I get the two of them and me ride to the airport at 6:45, and I'm on the way home, and I get a text from Margot that just said, hey, you always have to make sure AJ has his laptop when he leaves. And I didn't know if she was kidding or apparently that was a real story. I did reply saying that I was...
You're not even going to believe the text that I just got from your wife because she can't text you because your phone's actually charging on my laptop right now. So she texted me this morning, AJ forgot his computer again. I'm so happy this weekend is over. She just texted me right this second that says, Vinny's at the airport and his ID is not.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So you got just, I love your kids. They are the greatest kids in the world, but every one of them is just dumber than a stump.
Well, I don't know that I go that far. The girls have never had this issue.
That's true.
They always have their,
except when Gianni dropped everybody's phone into the water.
That's true. And she also did leave the father of the bride's suit at home the night before her wedding. So I had to make sure we made arrangements for that a couple weekends ago to get a suit for me to wear the next day at her wedding, delivered from Shoreview to St. Cloud. There have been a few hiccups along the way, but on this particular weekend, I'd give the guys a mild pass only because of the fatigue. But I always feel like, well, if you know that, then get your stuff together the night before just to make sure. Yeah. But I did empty out the car, and I even said to Vinny as I was leaving the house to come here, and he was going to the airport with his mom, so now you have everything out of the car, right? I grabbed your wallet, and you're in the back seat. Yep, everything's out. And he said, I have everything I need. I have my wallet and my backpack. Any other stuff that I leave here, I don't really need. Well, it turns out he needed.
Apparently left it at a gas station.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that part I didn't know.
Yep. So all right.
I should check in with you more often and see what's happening inside my house.
Usually when on the road, your wife calls me to find out where you are. All right. Let's talk Vladimir Tarasenko. So that was the news of the day. Wild traded future considerations, which is a hockey term for nothing. I mean, they literally took on his contract for free. $4.75 million final year of the deal. He's 3 years removed from a 34-goal, 82-point season. He's obviously a former superstar, won 2 cups since 2019, but his game has definitely taken a turn for the worse the last couple of years. The Wild are taking a gamble. It's a cheaper option by far than anybody. For the guys that they are interested in tomorrow, Brock Besser, it would cost them a lot of money. And for him to sign here, he would need a long-term deal, 6 or 7 years probably, and it's probably more than the Wild are willing to do. He's got a ton of different options, I'm sure, starting Tuesday. The Wild decided when they probably started to read the tea leaves and think that they weren't going to get Brock, or weren't willing to give him the deal that would probably get it done. This is what they pivoted to. What's your initial thoughts?
Well, it's a low risk shot, really. They've got the money to make this work on a 1-year deal, and I think you're exactly right with how it likely broke down. And we've talked a lot over the last few months about how this is a thin free agent class. There will likely be some mistakes made tomorrow when it opens, and teams will overpay for those few players that are available just because it's a supply and demand issue. And it's a year where the cap's going up. So more teams have money. There are fewer people out there that are worthy of a contract. I think that's why you saw so much activity over the last few days with teams re-signing their current players, just because they were realizing that options that might be out there are not necessarily better. I was wrong about Tarasenko a couple of years ago when Florida acquired him. I didn't think he made much sense as an addition for that team, and yet he ended up being very good for them during that playoff run in a role that wasn't the same kind of role we've seen him throughout his career.
He was pretty much playing on the wing with Luosterainen and Lundell.
Yeah, and had five goals, 10 points, if I remember right, during that playoff run. And I just remember a couple of times thinking that when he was added, I thought it didn't make much sense. He didn't seem to fit the personality, the speed, the style of play in Florida, but yet he was a very productive player for him in the playoffs. That was just at the end of a year ago. So it didn't seem to work out too well for him in Detroit. He wasn't playing in a spot where he was likely to have a lot of success playing in a lower in the lineup role. I would assume that the Wild have him slotted to play in their top 6.
Yeah, they have him, I think, at second line right wing. And then, so the question is then, how do you juggle it? Is it Zuccarello on the right wing with Kaprizov, or is it Boldy? And then obviously one of them would be on the left wing with Tarasenko. The one thing they have to do is keep him on his off wing. That's where he's been successful. That's where he wants to play. So Boldy or Zuccarello would have to move to the left wing. As we know, both of them like also playing on their offside. So we'll see how that comes. We've seen Boldy play left wing plenty of times, and he's good at both. I will say that just watching him the last year, he doesn't look like he can get there anymore. But this is the type of thing that might be able to invigorate him. Right. It happens early in the summer. He gets excited. He's going to be playing with Kirill. That type of stuff. Bill, the Wild put out a social media post of Bill's conversation with him on the phone today. We didn't hear what Vlad was saying, but it certainly sounds like that from Bill's end of things that Vlad was excited to get this new opportunity.
And to be clear, I don't watch a lot of Red Wings games during the course of the year. The Wild only see him a couple times, and one of the times this year was a national TV game, so I didn't even see that game live. So I didn't really, but the games I watched, I agree with you. He's not the same player. They're not getting the superstar that was in the league a few years ago, but you never know. Maybe playing with better players, playing with more scoring minded players can help him. And we'll see. In the worst case scenario is at least it fills a spot with a guy with some skill that would have been far more expensive for a better option right now for this year. And it prevents you from having to fill that in a spot where you'd have to overpay dramatically. And then maybe next year it's the time that you really take your shot at a longer term fix. And, there are some other options in the Wild lineup should Tarasenko not work out quite the way you're hoping, or even over 82 games or 84 games, that there might be a few stretches where his game wanes. Well, you've got some other guys. Marcus Johansson has shown he could potentially play in that role in a short term. Liam Ogren might be ready this year to take a more elevated role in a lineup. We've seen Marcus Foligno succeed in short stints in that kind of a role. So they do have some other guys that this isn't like this is your only shot at a guy that can play in the top 6.
Yeah, I mean, it's a flyer, obviously, and a way less risk. And what it does, and I know that there's, it was funny today because looking at the reaction from fans, some were really upset with it, some were very excited with it, almost like they were trading for the old Vladimir Tarasenko. But the one thing I will say is, you know, and I know the fans don't want to hear this because they've been patient waiting for 4 years of the buyout and they want the big home runs to happen this summer. But what it does is it sort of fills that hole now, doesn't get you tied into a bigger deal on a lesser class, and now it sort of keeps them into, as Bill Guerin's been saying, the game, where now, whether it's this year or next summer, they can go big game hunting and trades. You know, what if a Tage Thompson says, you know what, enough, I'm out of here, man, trade me. You know, like that type of stuff. Because Bill has openly, he talked the other day, you know, Rantanen, Kachuk, big guys get traded in this league all the time. And the Wild, because of the buyout pain that they've been in, they haven't been able to get in those games. And now what this does is instead of giving 7 years to Nikolai Ehlers or Brock Besser, it allows you now to continue to have flexibility in the future, and you're filling a hole this year with a guy that you're betting on is going to produce.
And maybe you get lucky and he does recapture a little magic just because he's playing in a new spot where change of scenery, playing with younger players, whatever the case might be. But right now, if that deal becomes available, that player becomes available, let's say December, January, or approaching the trade deadline, you've got some flexibility where you could make a move that would allow you to add that player, maybe even a player with term left, because you haven't backed yourself into a corner.
My colleague at The Athletic, Joe Smith, NHL on the X Machine, he'll be on Bill Guerin's Zoom here in about 12 minutes, so pay attention to Joe's account. And you can see some of the things that Bill Guerin is saying and the reasons for this move. Question from the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line. A question for you and the heir apparent. Question is, since the Wild traded for Vladimir Tarasenko, making it $4.75 million, could they have interest in doing a similar trade for an experienced center to fill the bill for 2 years with, quote, Wild killer Ryan O'Reilly from Nashville? He's got a few productive years left, I'd say. Age 34, bigger guy at 6'1", 55.7 faceoff winner, still approximately a 70 point guy. I would say my answer to that right now is the Wild absolutely could do something like that. But last year at the trade deadline, Ryan O'Reilly had no trade protection, and Barry Trotz, out of respect, allowed him to make the decision on whether he would go somewhere, and he chose to stay in Nashville. So I think that his goal right now, at least currently as we speak today, is to not be traded. Now, could that change in season at the trade deadline? Perhaps. I'll be interested to see, Anthony, what will happen tomorrow, because the Wild, the one thing when you look at their depth chart, and I put it out today at The Athletic in my Tarasenko piece, is let's just, however you want to shuffle it, all right? You got Kaprizov, Eriksson, Zuccarello, Boldy, Rossi, and Tarasenko is how I framed it. Third line right now, I have Foligno, Hartman, Trenyan, and a fourth line of Johansson, Urhoff, and Ogren. This is just right now. Tomorrow, if they add a forward or two, it's going to move the needle, shuffle things around. For instance, if they go get a center tomorrow, now probably Ryan Hartman slides to the right. That center could be your third line center, or Urhoff is there, or Rossi is there, and then Trenyan goes down to the fourth line. Of the centers out there tomorrow, and I'm sure you haven't dug into the numbers, but the one thing the Wild have a need for, that there are plenty out there, are penalty killing, face-off winning machines. There's a lot of great face-off guys out there. You know, Christian Dvorak,
he's been really good.
Really good face-off guy, right, and a great killer. He's a vanilla player, 30 points a year pretty much. Ironically, as I wrote today in The Athletic, the Wild tried to trade for him like 6 years ago when Fenton was here. They offered Zucker and Niederreiter to Arizona for Fisher and Dvorak, and luckily at the time, Arizona said no. But you have Dvorak out there. You have Nico Sturm, who I had on the radio last week, 60% face-off guy, getting a lot of interest, I think, even though there's no tampering in today's NHL. Sean Corrali is somebody that really, he plays with an edge, wins draws, kills. Radek Faksa, another one. There are guys out there that the Wild could take a swing on tomorrow, on a 3 or 4 year term, and you put them at third line or fourth line center.
Yeah, essentially filling the role that Freddie Gaudreau had here, but maybe it's a player that is a little bit more accomplished on the faceoff dot, and Gaudreau was a good player and an effective killer. Although this year I think that slipped a little bit. But all of those guys you just mentioned might be a slightly better version of what the Wild traded away in Gaudreau. So yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think those players are interesting. I mean, all of this, to me, this all comes back to what happens with Marco Rossi, and because that's the first domino that almost has to fall in these spots, and whether it be I know there's a lot of talk about a potential offer sheet, and then will the Wild match it or not? Still, I'm sure there are trade talks that are in the works, and all of that could dictate this. If he goes and there's not a center in return, does Ryan Hartman move up into the top 6? Does the guy they acquire or sign here end up being your third line guy? I just think there's a lot of different paths the Wild could take, but all the whys in the road all seem to involve Marco Rossi to me.
Absolutely. And let's get to that right now, and then we'll take a break and we can talk more about it on the other side. But as of 5 minutes before the show, still not going well. They haven't talked in 3 weeks, which is a little surprising just because as of tomorrow, he can theoretically sign an offer sheet elsewhere. But they are not bridging a gap right now. The Wild think that on a 2 or 3 year deal that he's less than a $5 million player. Matthew Nyes, JJ Peterka was just traded for Utah. Nyes in the last 2 years has less points than Marco Rossi. Peterka has 18 more points. Coronado right under Marco's production the last 2 years. He's at 6.5. And the Wild are saying that you're less than a $5 million player on that term, on a short-term deal. Right. They've offered him 5 times 5. But we are seeing now an age where the production of these players are 6, 7, 7.5, 7.75 players. Now, I would agree.
There's some difference to some of those players,
right, but the way the contracts are done in the NHL is that's how it's done in the NHL. It's based on your stats. I mean, that's how contracts are done, and that's where the problem, where the gap is going to need to be bridged, because right now the Wild don't seem to be, budging, and neither does his side.
Yeah, and the only thing I would say is the players to whom you compare him there both took large steps from 2 years ago to last year. Nyes and Coronado both did. Nyes, I think, established himself as
Rossi was a 0-point guy 2 years ago.
Right, but you're saying 3 years ago. He went 40 to 60.
Right.
And those guys, I think, took bigger jumps where it looked, anyway, in terms of their role and their production, it was Coronado went from small numbers, but I know they were really high on him. And then last year kind of proved everything right. Like, this is the guy we thought we had in Calgary. And Nye is just kind of a different player with a little more size. And I think Toronto saw in him that, okay, we thought this is what we had in a bigger body. A lot of reason for optimism to think that the path is going to continue on the same upward trend for him. And not that I believe that Marco is not. I think he hasn't reached his ceiling yet. But those guys it's just a little bit different, I think, in their roles, in their type of player, style of play, that I don't know that it's an apples to apples comparison to look at Rossi just by numbers and say, here's what those guys got, therefore here's what Marco should get.
Right. So to your point before on offer sheets so as of tomorrow, he'd secondly sign one. I don't think the Wild are worried about it. They definitely have the space to match if they wanted to, but if he's signing an offer sheet, it's going to be a $6 or $7 million offer sheet. And if the Wild then would have to make a significant decision because they don't feel like he's that player and don't seem to want to commit to that. But it'll be interesting because a 5-year offer sheet at say $7 million, that's a $7 million compensation package back. But as you and I were talking about this morning, if it was 7 times 7, suddenly that's 40. The way it works is that then you'd still be on a 5-year term in terms of the compensation. So you divide the 49 divided by 5, and suddenly the compensation would be like a $9.8 million worth of compensation. And again, that's the different threshold. Suddenly it's a couple first, a second, a third. It's just going to be really interesting on where this goes. Now, I don't think the Wild believe that he's going to get an offer sheet. We'll see if a team steps up and gives him one. The one thing I can tell you is that Marco is open for business. They are going to be shopping for that to try to force the Wild's hand here where they either have to match that contract or they let him go in a 7-day
span. Not only that, but you have to get a team that's willing to give you the offer sheet. 100%. It isn't just Marco deciding, hey, here's what my offer sheet is. Some team has to be willing to do that because not only is there compensation, but they have to be willing to pay the player. So for a team to just arbitrarily say, I'm not positive that he's going to get an offer sheet that's much north of what the Wild have already offered him. Maybe he will, but I don't see it. I don't see a team out there willing to say that we'll give you $7 million per on a 5-year deal. I'm not positive that deal is out there for him. And if it is, then the Wild's decision becomes, well, is there another center option that we like, that the contract's more palatable? That plus the compensation makes it essentially a trade of a free agent and some draft picks in exchange for Marco. I don't know. We'll see. And I know that there's been a lot written about this. And the only thing that I've shared this when people have asked me, this isn't the first time that there's been contentious negotiations between players and teams. And in many of those cases, the player still winds up staying with the team. And it isn't like it's a recipe for disaster for the rest of the guy's career. There are negotiations where they get heated and they get contentious, and then once they're done, everything's mended and the player's just fine. And think about holdouts, when guys hold out until the last possible minute. It very rarely. Kaprizov is one of them, right? And it isn't like the other players really. To them, that's between you and your agent and the team. Once you're inside that room, then it's let's go together.
I agree with you. I do think on this one that there would have to be some trust regained. The difference with those guys, not so much Fiala, but definitely Kaprizov, is that was total business. This one is a player that knows he's being shopped around the league, and suddenly they couldn't make the trade, and now they want to sign him.
All that's true, but again, think about how many times there are trade rumors about players, and even if teams deny it, the players know. Yeah. They know when their agents are hearing about it. Yep. They know they're being shopped. And
Philip Gustafson last year, and he obviously came back.
Well, you mentioned Jason Zucker in that trade. He was rumored to be going to Calgary too at one point, and yet I remember talking to him a few times about it during that time, and he was like, "Look, all I can do is show up and play, and until they call me and tell me that a deal's done, all I can do is worry about playing tonight." And it's not easy. It's a huge distraction. These aren't just names on a fantasy hockey roster. These are real humans with families and kids with friends and wives that are connected in the community. And all of a sudden they hear their name, like, I might be going to Columbus, I might be going to Tampa, I might be going to Denver, whatever it is. That it's life being uprooted. It's not easy for players to live with that, but it's a part of their world as a pro athlete.
Absolutely. Let's do this. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the Twins. We'll talk some more Wild hockey. Greg Cronin still to come. The new Iowa Wild coach was just with the Anaheim Ducks. Lou Nanne, Johnny Athletic, Elliot Friedman, Kevin Weeks as well. We'll be back on the Fan.